It's not showing us live on the Facebook page yet.
Sorry. I was saying just give it a few seconds because on my side it's saying you are live.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Lion Hearts of Africa Men's Virtual Conversation. My name is Stanley Dliwayo, and I will be your moderator today. I am thrilled to have you all with us. The Lion Hearts of Africa initiative is dedicated to fostering open conversations among men about wellness, mental health, and personal development. Our goal is to create a supportive environment where men can share their experiences, learn from one another, and grow together. Today, we have the honor of hearing from two distinguished speakers. First, we welcome Dr. Leonard Makoni of Well Connect, a respected professional in wellness who will share valuable insights. Welcome, Dr. Makoni.
Yes, thank you, Stanley. Hello, Eddie. Welcome, listeners. Thank you for joining us today.
We have Eddie Mihigo of Mebala Youth Studios, a Botswana-based NGO that focuses on community programs for young people and is known for his impactful contributions to the community.
Hello, Leonard. Hello, Dr. Leonard. Thank you. Hello, Leonard. Hello, Stanley. Thank you so much for having me. And good evening to everybody who's joining us on all platforms.
Thank you, Eddie. Here's how this conversation today will flow. Our speakers will present their insights, and during their presentations, we encourage you to send in your questions via the chat feature. We will collect these questions and address them at the end of the discussion. We want this to be an engaging and interactive session, so please don't hesitate to participate. Your thoughts, your questions, and experiences are what makes the initiative valuable. Without further ado, let's dive into our discussion, and I would like to invite Eddie about fatherhood and navigating fatherhood without a blueprint. How does this work?
Yeah, it's a very interesting one because in my own experience, I grew up with a father for the most part. He was around, but not in a way in which I wanted him to be. I believe, fatherhood is a very interesting term because it's not just someone who brings you into the world, but it's also someone who imparts certain things onto you as you are growing up. So it was interesting that my dad always, always brought me up in the sense of I'm the Sergeant General, I'm your president. To you, I am everything, which is not a lie. It's true that he was my provider, he was my support structure, all of those things. And in as much as I was an only child, or I am still an only child, uh, he was very harsh in the way he brought me up. Of course, eventually I've come to appreciate some of those lessons, but I think as I was growing, I would have loved a little bit of softness from him, but I was fortunate enough to get that in abundance from my mother. So that's the thing about a blueprint, though, is that no one teaches you how to do these things. I like to tell my peers that my father only learned how to parent from his parent, right? So he took some of what his father bestowed towards him and how it was done, and he passed it on, and he added his own flavor, and his own flavor sometimes involved the rod and a couple of punches here and there just to get the point across. That's the best he could do. And of course, in at that time, which is around what the he's from the 60s, the 70s era. That's when he grew up, right? Because my father was born in the 50s. Um, he only knew about provision based on that environment. So for him, it's like, listen, every month I get paid. We go out, I get you a couple of things, I pay for your school fees, and I don't owe you anything else apart from that. That's all you need from me. And I remember vividly one day when he sat me down when I was a little bit older and broke it down like that and said, "Listen, my son, all these actions are enough for you to see that I love you, and I don't have to ever tell you that in your life, you know." And I was a bit hurt, but that was the reality of how he grew up, and how his environment was. So it's interesting that when now I'm in that very position, and I have to figure out, okay, how do I bring up a child, especially a son? You see, this boy was an only son to me for 10 years, and I'm like, okay, we're in the same exact position. How do I avoid, making him feel the way I felt? Yes, he needs to understand and he needs to learn some of these lessons, but how do I do it in a way that he doesn't feel bad? And I had nothing in my toolbox because the only thing I was that was passed on to me was that harshness and the rod and the discipline. And of course, luckily again, I have a very good relationship with my wife in that I have conversations with her about this. I'm just not gonna wake up in the morning to a child who's done something wrong, whip up my belt and start belting. You see, so I'm gonna tell her to say, listen, I think I'm going to do that, and she says, no, I was never whooped as a child by my mother ever in my life, and I didn't turn out bad. Now, did I? So we're not gonna institute that in this house. And now I'm thinking, what else do I have? That's the only way I knew how to instill this form of discipline. And I think that's when I realized that, you know what, there's no rule book. There's no template. There's no blueprint. You know, let me maybe try something else and see if it's going to work. And that's the journey I'm in right now. And even today, it gets very scary in that I see elements of my younger self when I was being a bit rebellious popping up in my son in different ways. He has a different temperament, yes, but I can see the rebellion in him. I can see the rebellion in him, and I'm like, it's scary, but also it's interesting because the tools that I have found now in the present around me, are really allowing me to get things done. For example, um, we've given him everything. Whether it's devices, whether it's all the toys in the world, everything. We've never shied away from buying him things. And what I've learned is whenever he does something wrong, I just take something away from him. You see, and in my years, if you did that, I found a way around it. He doesn't have that kind of uh, he doesn't have that resourcefulness just yet. He depends on me for almost everything. So if I switch off the internet today, when I come back home from work, he's gonna ask me what happened to the internet, and then we're gonna have a conversation. But even that conversation, there's no rule book for how you talk to your children. You know, when like I said, when I was being spoken to as a young man, it was mostly the point were driven across by the stick, right? And then you were asked if you understood. Whereas now I have to sit down with my son and have a conversation with him and make him understand and have him ask me questions, and I respond, and sometimes he's gonna call me out even, uh, and uh, and in calling me out, sometimes it calls for self-reflection, and sometimes I realize, okay, the reason he made that mistake is because I didn't give him a warning before, or I didn't at least try and tell him that, no, if you do this, this is what will happen. And at some point, I have to apologize to my son and say, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't really prepare you for this situation, and I apologize for that, which is something my father would never do. Even something small as uh, he's flipping through the channels and he passes a channel which has a movie that he wants to watch, and I tell him, you skipped the channel. He's gonna say, no, I know what I'm doing. I'm your father. And then he's gonna go twice around, finish the channels, go back, get to the right channel, and then he's not even gonna tell me, oh, so that's what you meant. I'm sorry, I didn't. No, we just continue as we were, as if nothing happened, and we move on with our lives. So that again, like I said, that was him, right? This and some of what he taught me through that, I always say, also taught me what not to do around, my tribe now. So it's very interesting, and I always, sometimes I listen to a certain kind of men, especially my age mates, who say, no, the only way to raise a child is the same way we were raised. And I tell them, no, that's not the case. You have to figure it out for yourself, and you have to do it with the community around you, which is the grandparents, if they're there, which is your wife, and which is the child himself, because the child itself will tell you, will communicate to you their level of maturity even at a young age, what they're able to grasp, and how they're able to react to what you tell them. Yes.
So the experiences and from the parents and the sons, in the different generations are definitely evident. And there are challenges that are faced by men and fathers, by men and the fathers and their sons. Like you were saying, in the presence or absence of a traditional guide that guides us with a blueprint that we knew previously and have now learned to adopt for the good of our sons. Now, with that in mind, Dr. Leonard, how then do we create a safe space for dialogue, like Eddie was talking about, between fathers and sons?
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Let me preamble this by saying society is in constant transition. Eddie's father is a 50s child. I hit 60s. We are already having my 2000 son. I've worked with 25-year-olds who are fathers already. That's where I'm stretching. I am 49 years without my father now. So I was pretty young when he died. And the major transition for me there is that the community, Eddie, your last point, the community as we knew it is dissociated. We are increasingly more isolated than we used to be. I had the privilege of spending my first 12 years in the village, and everyone was my parent. I went into the city, and relatively late 70s, probably into mid 80s, we were still communities. We knew at Stanley's house, the key, you will find it under this mat, under this pot. We were still a community. Anyone in your street could correct you. So conversations were happening there, which would cover up for the absence of this father figure in terms of biological father. And I don't believe that we have taken time to stop and therefore restructure ourselves such that in course the village is recreated, because we need it. Why do I say that? While my father died, I had a father figure, a brother-in-law who took me in terms of providing. Very busy. I think a class of people which has been neglected by those who died for this country. I was an internally displaced person. There are many of us. So that was not an easy time during the war to be internally displaced, because I remember counting, we were like 10 young people in a 2-3 bedroomed house, or 3-roomed house, not even bedroomed. And some of us at times would have to go to other people to sleep. So he was too busy to be available as the father figure. And I have no idea how it happened. Again, the community were related around totems. So a Nyati man, I call him Seguru Chinembiri. I understand, in fact, he passed away 3-5 years back. Very uneducated man, but he was available for me. After school, I would be seated by him, and I have no idea any message he gave me, but he stabilized me. They were life lessons he gave me. So I managed to get a surrogate father in him, let alone all the other people in the community who talk to you. So I strongly believe, yes, we have advanced. We are now too cautious about who is next door, who is working with our children, but we lost something valuable in not being associated as communities. We therefore need to find a restructuring of ourselves as a society to create uncles and brothers who then create that extra father figure if I am not there, because it does happen. Now that brings us to what happens with Leonard as a father. Surely I can only work with what I had. So first 12 years of my first son, I knew what my father used to do. But again, this is a completely different child. I didn't go for crash. He was going for crash. We had TV. I grew up without a TV. So the activities are completely different. That to me implies every father figure needs to know that you are a step behind. You have to learn, therefore, to be ahead of your child if you're going to connect with their world, because they are living in a world. They are born after you, but they are living in a world ahead of you. And a lot of us, I don't think we stop and consider that. That's why the principle, I'll raise you the way I was raised, is not going to work. There definitely is never going to be a handbook, because no mother comes out of the maternity ward with a manual. And every child is different, peculiar, 1 in 8 billion. So you are going to have to learn to live with that child. And again, they come as barbaric as they can be. They have no language, they don't know how to respect. We introduce them into the world with needs, but they don't know how to express them. So all they know is to cry, and that cry in no time is translated as, hey, you raise a temper and people will run to you. So you will start calling children naughty or rebellious when all they've learned is, you know what, when you throw a tantrum, things happen. So there is a place where you need to speak into their lives as early as possible. And I've been greatly helped by materials which have been developed by psychologists who have studied how children grow, how children develop, how children process their brain development and how to use it, how emotionally they connect or disconnect. We have to go to that school, because if we are to raise children, a generation that's going to be healthy, intact, we have to learn how to raise children. I don't know why we think it will happen naturally. I come out of the animal world. I had to study the development of a cow to raise it to be a productive animal, a chicken. So why don't we learn how to raise a human being? Because that's the most critical resource we have in the world. And I think governments and probably churches and businesses ought to be investing in preparing people to be parents, because that's the greatest skill we need. A child who has been damaged by Leonard, it doesn't matter how excellent their results will be, how skilled, how hardworking they will be. If they are emotionally damaged, they are going to be a disaster. They'll be toxic to everyone around them. They'll destroy a good company. They will destroy a nation, and these are recorded cases in the world where wars have been started by people who have been damaged because of failure of parenting. So we have to learn the developmental stages of children, but also at the same time what skills we need at each stage of development of the children that we have been given. How do we need ourselves to develop with them? Because it starts from the way the relationship of the father and mother comes. That's where a lot of people immediately reject the child or abandon the mother. You haven't abandoned the mother, you've abandoned the son. And ultimately, whatever fears you have, whether it's societal or it's personal, I don't have enough money, it's a shameful way of getting into marriage, if it's marriage or having a child, already all those are going to tell. And part of that is because we are not being guided, we are not being supported, and we need to learn how to do all that. Then, of course, once you start relating to the child, there are issues we take for granted. Maybe my father died too early, but I don't remember his voice anymore, but I don't remember him ever saying, I love you. And I thank God my mother is 91 this year, and a couple of times I've heard her telling me, I love you, my son, in her relatively broken English, but not in Shona. So there are certain things which you just don't do in our vernacular. It's almost like to say Ndokuda sounds like it's not human, it's not real. I don't know. But we have to learn to do all that. And some of these are habits, are ways of relating which we are perpetuating to what good. It's not culture, it's not tradition. Anyway, culture, tradition is changing as we move. It's more global today. We're speaking hardly any family which is not multilingual now. So why don't we therefore use multiple languages, including emotional languages, if that's what's going to create a healthy person? So it's not going to be easy, but we have to know that being a father is hard work. It's hard work from birth of that child, conception of that child, I should say, until that child dies, unless you die earlier.
How then do we build bridges of understanding? How can these personal experiences that we have learned lead us to forgiveness and maybe stronger relationships by building bridges of understanding between fathers and sons?
I think dialogue is very important, and there's a belief that men don't know how to speak, and I think initially, yeah, we are taught to speak a certain way. We have to be authoritarian. We have to wear the head and not the tail. So when you speak, you have to command. But you come to realize that, as my mother says, your father might be the head, but I'm the neck. So before he gives you any instruction, best believe he comes and consults with me, and we have a conversation about it. So what comes out as an instruction to you started as a conversation with us in the bedroom. So I think the first most important thing is that, and it takes time to really learn how to talk. And interestingly, a child will teach you how to talk. My son taught me how to really open up to him and listen to him as well, because sometimes we listen with what we are expecting the child to say, rather than really listening to what the child is actually saying. So it took time for me to really sit down and listen, and sometimes listen to non-verbal cues, because there's situations where, for example, I'd be having a very hard morning where I'm really deep in my intrusive thoughts, and my son would just sit down next to me and put his hand on my lap, and would just sit there and maybe watch cartoons, And it took time for me to really read those cues to say, well, maybe he just wants to spend some time with me and do this thing that he wants to do. And I think conversations are very, very, very important in terms of building bridges. But also, I think learning to talk to my son also taught my father how to speak to his grandson, because and he was very open. And when the times when they speak on the phone, I'm actually shocked. I'm like, yeah, well, when I was 10, 11, you never spoke to me in that way. And you're so soft with this young man. But I think it and just watching them also converse like that really has allowed me to appreciate my father for who he really is inside, and to see a softer side of him, and to really bear with him and appreciate what he was trying to do the best way he could. I'll tell you, the best moment I ever had with my father was when I graduated university. And I remember we had a small graduation lunch at my house, and he almost didn't make it because he was coming from outside the country. He made it at the last minute. And I'll say this again. I hope none of my old colleagues are are watching. But I was the only one whose graduation was attended by our head of department, by our dean. So, and our dean he's a doctor. So my father stood in front and he said, uh, all I ever wanted to do was to bring this guy to this moment here. All of those things, and being a father is difficult, and he gave a very, very endearing speech. And I stood there next to him and I'm thinking, why didn't you tell me this 5, 10 years ago? Why did you wait until now to tell me that? Because I think if you had just broken it down like this, I think our lives would have been so much easier, would have been clashing a lot less. But at that point, I understood that, number one, I think my father started respecting me as a man at that point. That's number one. And I think number two, I really started bearing with him a whole lot more. I kind of related to the burden that was on his shoulders in terms of raising a son, and hoping that son that he's raising becomes someone, or something valuable in his life. And for him, seeing our head of department there, I think, was a sign that, okay, if this old man decided to come here instead of being at the 8 other simultaneous lunches that are happening now, then there must be something about this guy that he appreciates. But I say that to say, in life, everything happens the way it happens, and we just have to make the best of whatever happens, and we need to really, again, move closer to the person that you're trying to comprehend, that you're trying to understand. Because uh, my son, for example, I know he looks at me like I'm an enigma, like I don't understand this man. Sometimes we look at each other and I can tell that he's trying to decipher the kind of person that I am. And for a very long time, that's how I looked at my father as well. But over time, that has softened a lot, and we've kind of become friends. I can call him anytime. He'll pick up, and we have conversations about any and everything. Some things that 10, 15 years ago, well, more than 15 years ago, that would have never spoken about, because I would have just felt like, "Oh, this is an old man," and he would have felt like, this is a small boy. I have no time for him. So I think time heals everything, and we have to allow time to do its work. But at the same time, we need to do work on ourselves as well, and we need to be very cognizant and aware of all the blessings that are placed around us. Your son is there to actually bridge the gap between you and your father in terms of a relationship. And if you just let that be organically, you find that the generational blessing is there, in that everybody lives in harmony, and there's very few clashes. Of course, my son and I, we get along very well, and even when we have a misunderstanding, it's always very objective. It's always towards something where he understands that I just want the best for him, and vice versa. So I think that's how we can build those bridges. We need to be, we need to bear with our folks, with our fathers. We need to allow, if you have children, allow your fathers time with their grandkids. You will see, you will learn so much from the interactions the two of them are going to have, and that will teach you how to speak to your dad as you move forward.
Dr. Makoni, there seems to be a sense that as men, we need to reclaim positive masculinity. How then can fathers model this for their sons? And what impact does it have on future generations?
You know, I'm going to share from my belief system because that's all I have that I can give you. And I believe I was created by God by design. I refuse to be reduced to a Toyota vehicle, which was by accident. So Big Bang, sorry, at this stage
Doesn't
hasn't
work.
completed. Why do I say that? Because I think our greatest challenge is without a belief system, a conviction of some kind, we live lives without purpose. We don't know where to find security. This whole discussion is speaking to uh, how does a son feel secure around a father? And you talk to somebody who has never known their father, they are very unsettled. They die without peace. So the basis of security is not soldiers, is not walls. It's just belonging, to know that I've got a father somewhere. But to know, even more importantly, that behind my father is a God who allowed me to be born into this space. If every child is to hear that I'm your father on this earth, but there's a father who is with you, that sense of security is even greater. Even then, when you will lose your father for whatever reason, whether they've been taken by ending of life or they've been taken to work in Wenela or in diaspora or just disappeared into a beer hall and never came back, you know that there's a father somewhere behind this person. That will make a big difference. But for those who are fathers who are there, then you know your purpose is to translate, to transfer something more valuable than a house, than money, a bank account, than experiences. I met a man, 72-year-old, earlier this year. He had an incident, struggling with breathing, so he was in a hospital recovering. And his son says, "Hey, you should go and talk to dad," because they feared he was dying. I went there, listened to him, and within 5 minutes, he started crying. He's a 72-year-old man. You talk of masculinity, that's a real man. But at this stage, what was he facing? I have all these things. It tells me a business that could easily run for another a good decade or so if people just work on it. But who is going to take over all that I have done? That was his burden. Because his son is in diaspora, his grandchildren are diaspora. There doesn't seem to be any way of coming back. So who are you going to transfer all that you have done, you have learned, you have impacted to the next generation? And I think that's where even those who are fathers are going to find their peace. If you know you have done your best to transfer the love for God and humanity to the next generation, you'll die in peace. That's the basis of masculinity. What do you exist for? So you are not going to be pushed around by men don't cry, men don't. Why? because Jesus wept. He was a real man. Elijah was depressed. It's human to get depressed. David was tempted and he turned around. You will be tempted, you can turn around. Those are the issues that men are facing. And somehow to come and share with a brother, I'm struggling, you think it's a weakness. That's the source of strength. What moves you to go and share with a brother is because there's a greater cause. I want to die right with God, a conviction, a faith. I think that's where masculinity begins to make sense. It begins, therefore, to shape whether father is absent or is present. If God is present, even the issues of forgiveness become real, because the unforgiveness and the bitterness that you will carry will only draw you back. And of course, definitely, is going to be a challenge between you and God, you and your next spouse, you and your children, you and your workers. And I've seen this in the counseling room. As long one has not been able to forgive. In fact, I'm absolutely convinced right now that divorce doesn't happen simply because people don't love each other, but because they have not been helped to know how to forgive. And I've seen many people who have been helped to get to that place of forgiving and have lived beyond the hurt of betrayal. So masculinity doesn't make sense without a belief system. And for me, it has made sense when what drives that is the belief in God. Jesus, I think, is the epitome of masculinity that we can look at in this world.
The cycle of silence and emotional pain then exists in father and son relationships. And I feel this is where cycles need breaking. How do we break these cycles? What steps can be taken to break these cycles to create healthier dynamics?
I mean, like I've said earlier, you know, conversations are very important. I mean, just yesterday, I had a discussion with a group of men who are part of an institution here in Gaborone, and when they came in, it was, you could sense that there was a bit of tension in the room. But by the time we finished, 2 hours later, um, everybody was a lot more relaxed, and when I told them, you can take my number and call me, and everybody took out their notebook and wrote the number down, and they even asked for my email. Now, I don't know if they're actually going to go ahead and do it or not, but I believe just being able to converse did change their stance a little bit. So I think sometimes we build these walls around us, and mostly it's because we've been hardened by our environment and by the perception of who we're supposed to be, which are community based. But the more you talk to people, the more you're in the same environment with men, especially men, you realize that there's nothing wrong with conversing. There's nothing wrong with sharing a few vulnerabilities here and there. Um, and these men were very shocked with some of what I told them. My first time getting a pedicure, my first time getting a manicure, my first time getting a facial, using my wife's beauty products every once in a while. So so it was very interesting that they actually even started talking about some of what they've done. One of the guys were like, actually, I've also used my wife's beauty products sometimes. So we started relating to each other like that. So I think sometimes I like to say that before you come out of a pit, you have to accept and acknowledge the fact that you are in the pit, you see. And usually with men, we have this situation where we have this definition of who we are and who we're supposed to be, and we are going in the wrong direction, but we are fine going in the wrong direction. You see, and when someone comes and says, no, no, but you should be going this way, we are so conditioned to what we're doing and where we're going that we're just in this bubble. It's almost cognitive dissonance, I think it's called, and it's almost as if someone is speaking Greek. But just as I think I'll also reference the Bible. You know, just like I think there was an apostle after Jesus died who was on the road, and there was someone who was walking next to this apostle, and they walked and walked throughout the journey. And I don't think we're told what happened after that. I don't think so. I think the story was really about the journey, and we don't even know if the person who was walking with the apostle converted or not. We don't know. So, but I do believe that in that journey, each one of them gained perspective, and I'm sure that wherever they went, they got into a situation or an experience where that gained perspective then moved them to a certain judgment. So so I think the most important thing for me personally, and what I've learned, uh, you know, with time and with experiences, is that conversations are very important. Being in the same spaces, very important. Exploring with different groups of men, very important. Because sometimes I get this thing, familiarity breeds contempt. I think sometimes we get so used to being with the same people, we think everybody is the same way. But two things are interesting. One, you might find that you are adding specific value to a certain group to help build that group up. But also, you might find that you are what was missing in a certain group as well. So your influence is what is going to allow that group to stop moving in one direction and to move in another direction. So I think for me that's the thing that we need, that is really missing.
Surely there must be an emotional healing that can occur when we confront these past issues, especially with fathers and sons. How then, Dr. Makoni, do we approach the healing process from all these differences that we're trying to bridge, that we want to confront on past issues?
Yeah. Well, inevitably in human relations, we're going to hurt each other. Doesn't matter how much your father loves you, he's human. There's something that's going to happen which can be disturbing. We are human. That's why I said, remember that behind your biological parents, there is God Himself who will not go wrong. Now, when there is a hurt, in most instances, the absenteeism of a father, whether emotionally or physically, the abuse or toxicity that may come from him failing to manage their own issues, which then spill over into a relationship, they deprive us. We run through my losses, loss of affection, loss of affirmation, loss of support, loss of presence, just to be friend with father, to hear a father's voice cheering you on as you run the last in a race. It helps to grow well. All those are losses that we have. So the first place for us, therefore, to deal with healing those emotional wounds is to acknowledge that they've been losses. They are real. Now, once you've acknowledged that, you accept the responsibility for your healing, because and healing is not going to come from outside. They may participate in your journey, but they are not responsible for your healing. Accept that responsibility. Then soon you realize that I have to do the hard work. Look at it this way: If you have a problem with your body, you go to the doctor, they write a prescription. If you take that prescription, shove it under the table and wait to go for a review to the doctor, you might never make it because you'll die. You have to go to the pharmacy to buy the meds. You have to swallow the meds. You have to do the physiotherapy. You have to, whatever is required has been prescribed. So you are responsible for your healing. Don't wait for someone from outside to do that for you, which therefore means you need to go out, seek for help. Counsel is important. And counsel means you want to look for, now we know there's professional counseling. Yes, there is informal support, which can be mentoring or coaching, but I'd recommend start with counseling so that you can hear yourself, the things we tell ourselves, those conversations, Eddie. Before you talk to your 6 men around you, you have said a lot in your head. And by the time you start talking to people, you've already set yourself in a certain perspective. Because my father wasn't there, I'm not as good as this one who had a father. Because my father didn't make enough money, therefore I don't qualify to be in this space. You've already placed yourself, compared yourself with everyone else. So your self-esteem could be low, not because you are inept, but simply because you think you're not good enough. And that kills you. So you want to be able to get to somebody who has the skills, who has the tools to help you hear yourself and therefore process exactly who you are and who you want to be and take you there. By the time you talk to everyone else, you are confident of who you are. So seek help, seek counsel. Then, of course, seek out just to support other people as well. Because in supporting those who may be weaker than you, you get stronger. You begin to reframe your story very differently. Way back, my mother had a problem. She broke her leg and she went to the doctor. Before she went, she was in the village. Before she went to the hospital, it was like, hey, she's dying. Eh? Then when I got to the hospital with her, we saw people who were in wheelchairs, people who could not walk, people who were like they're dying. In no time, she was up and about. So you need to reach out to support somebody else because there's somebody who is struggling more than you. Even if you are down, you can still stretch out your hand. So seek to support somebody else. Seek also to know yourself. Who are you? It goes back to that conviction. In all this mess, in all this world and its hurts, who are you? Which goes back for me, where am I in God? What purpose am I here for? So all those pains, all those aches, they have a purpose. I think it's Philippians who says pain is God's megaphone for grace. So he will take me somewhere. There's always pain anyway in this world, and you can choose which pain you want. There's the pain that will lead you to eternal pain if you refuse God, and there's the pain which will lead you to a life without pain if you walk through that pain with God. So all those are issues which you need to know, but also know your limitations. I'm not a God, I'm only a human being. I cannot control what has already happened. I can only influence this. I can influence that. All that begins to give you certain boundaries you can create. You work within your means, and slowly it's a process. Again, because you've got limitations, because there's been a wound, you don't just heal and you're up and about. It takes time. So be patient with the process. Time doesn't heal, but as you work with time, you will heal. You have to work at it.
Thank you for such wonderful insight. But, gentlemen, we did speak about navigating fatherhood without a blueprint. We spoke about creating safe spaces for dialogue, building bridges of understanding. We spoke about masculinity, reclaiming it in its positivity, breaking the cycles that exist. And we've just heard the learned Dr. Leonard, speak about the healing process. How then do we create a lasting legacy, gentlemen? How can fathers and sons work together to create a legacy of strength, a legacy of support, and maybe vulnerability or emotional openness?
I think if I could go first, I love what Dr. Leonard said about pain, really building us because even I always remember a child when a child is learning how to walk, it's a painful process. We might just see it as something that is mundane, but I saw my daughter struggling because she's a bit overweight and she struggled and she would struggle, but she would keep trying until she got it right and she was able to stand and take two steps and sometimes she wasn't very confident, but through her, I learned that repetition is important. I also learned that patience is important because she had to have the patience to get to a point where she trusts her own body to propel her forward and to keep her balanced. So I think, and also, of course, having someone there that she's looking out to, whether it's me or the mom. So I think even for us, we need figures, older figures that we can look up to, figures that we can confide in, who we know have gone through what we're going through in some way, shape, or form, who would be able to then, either direct us in one direction or at least give us words that will keep us motivated. But I just want to read you something in terms of how important these conversations are, and how sometimes a small gesture can have a lasting impact. So this is a young man who's watching right now, and he's saying, "That's very true. Conversation is important, and I'm enjoying this conversation. Every man seems to have an outer shell, and once that shell is broken, everything inside is soft. Once we find an icebreaker as men, the tension is gone. And fun fact is, we easily get along than women, but the outer shell is harder." In my book, I shared about he's written a book. He's in his 20s, he's in varsity, he's already written a book. He says in my book, I shared about the Johari's window, and how it's a very important. It's a very important communication technique that we should all learn. We need more of these conversations. So you can see already, just from an hour's long conversation is already an impact for someone who joined in, I think, at the 20 or 30-minute mark. So I think um, I think legacy is made out of things like this because I mean we are in different countries in different spaces, but because of the commonality that we have in what we're trying to achieve, we can have the conversation get started, and you never know who's gonna come in and jump on and even take it further than we've taken it. Someone who is 20 something years old and is already talking like this, in 20 years they might even start a movement and become president.
Dr. Makoni, your thoughts on creating a lasting legacy?
I think I lost connectivity at some point.
That's okay. We welcome you back. We were talking about creating a lasting legacy, and
Uh,
Eddie was just talking about the young gentleman who has written a book, and at the age of 20, and
mhm.
perhaps in the next 20 years, that man would be taking on the button stick and maybe starting a movement,
Mm.
as part of a future generation. What are your thoughts in creating a lasting legacy?
Again, I'll go back to purpose. We may all not have jobs to do, but we all have work to do.
Mm.
What am I existing for in this
Mm.
world? You know, when it comes to legacy, I look at my father. He died before I even finished grade 7. But his principle on education was clear. No question. There was no money, but it was a way to life. So we're 10 of us. He was committed to that. His principle on faith was clear. That I still hear, see him walking with us, praying with us, speaking the word. Those to me are traits, characteristics, are values that create a legacy that lasts longer than amount of monies that anyone can live. Money will be the icing. The real issue is, what are you leaving in another person that will make the world a better place to live? And when I cut across so far, I'm seeing a trait which is like my father replicating himself in our different professions, etc. There's something that each one of us is doing, which you could say, hey, this is an apple that fell from this man. So I think each one of us needs to have that conviction again. Uh, if I die today, have I done all I can to direct, to signpost everything that I can to my sons that there's a living God? Make your choice, but there's a living God. If I die having a moment, one more second, one more hour to talk to somebody and help them live that out, I may not pronounce it with words, but my life shows that. That's a more impactful legacy for me. Can you live a world that will find justice, a world where we have compassion, we don't exploit each other, we don't abuse each other, we are happy to see each other grow rather than I exploit to extract from you so that I be the biggest in the village? Humility. Those are the things that I think will build communities and legacies which will last longer than anything material that we can build.
Thank you. I would like to thank you and also, firstly, encourage our participants who are joining us online to reflect on their own relationships and how they can apply these insights that have been spoken about in able to foster deeper connection with their fathers, with their sons, and be able to use this to contribute and create a culture of openness, a culture of support that benefits not just the immediate family, but also benefits future generations as well. Gentlemen, thank you, Dr. Makoni. Thank you, Eddie Miigo, for your wonderful insights. We appreciate your time and your knowledge. We will just maybe see if what questions we may have gotten from the listenership that has joined us this evening, and possibly see how we can attend to these questions. Just checking in our box to see what has been dropped, and I think the Prince of Darkness maybe has come over and is giving me some connectivity issue. So bear with me as I try and establish. Maybe while I do that, if you could possibly speak to our participants at this stage, just to give any thoughts that come to mind.
Yeah, there's an interesting discussion around Movember and what it stands for in the social media space at the moment. Okay, I think apparently there are no questions. I think it was just the one comment.
Oh, great. Thanks, Eddie. Maybe you could let us know the comment we have there.
Oh no, that's the one I read from TK from Takuzwa.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the one.
Sorry to disturb you. Please carry on.
Oh,
And
okay. Yeah, I was saying there's an interesting discussion around what's happening right now because November has always been seen as what we call Movember, where men grow a mustache or facial hair towards a cause related to men, basically. And something interesting happened this year. There's the G20 summit uh, that is um, that's happening in South Africa, I think later this month, and women basically took it upon themselves to change their profile, pictures or on different social platforms to purple, to kind of bring awareness to the struggles they're still facing, especially in terms of GBV. And it just so happens that that it's happening while Movember is also taking place. Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, so now it's created a little bit of a friction because men are saying um, this is kind of a man's thing. It's a man's thing, and now ladies have come and they've now encroached into it and made it theirs. And while I was watching all of this unfolding with my some of my Facebook friends on my timeline, I think I just thought that, again, like we're saying, patience and just taking the time to listen to the other side. I think as men, especially I would say the men that I've become today, I've learned to take a step back and really just look from a distance and try and internalize whatever is going on. You see, so yes, why is it that women have to constantly, you know, cry about the situations they're in terms of GBV? Who is the author of this GBV? You know, what are we doing as men to to prepare and protect women and better prepare our own peers as men to make the situation better? Um, and so I've been reflecting on this, and I think the more we listen to each other, listen. There's someone who said you have two ears and one mouth, so you have to listen twice before you speak. So we before we speak, we have to listen to the other side and understand exactly what they're saying. And why is it that it just so happens that this time around, this friction is happening now in November? So I really, for me, I'd like to urge, the men who are here watching to just take a step back, appreciate, and look at how you can even provide a better platform for the women to even be heard more than you are being heard at the moment. Because I think that's what we're called for as men as well, especially men of virtue and of valor.
I feel as men, like you rightfully said, we should be able to look after ourselves. And once we have done that and we have sorted ourselves out, we are able to approach and be in a better position to help our women and make them feel the love that they so deserve from us. And as we approach the end of this conversation, I would like to remind everyone to continue these discussions beyond today. Let's take what we have learned and apply it into our lives, into our communities, for the betterment of not only us men, but also so that we can enable our women as we are stronger and able to do that. Thank you, gentlemen, and I would like to thank everyone for joining us today and hope this conversation was valuable and inspiring. Please stay in touch with the Lion Hearts of Africa initiative for future events, and we look forward to being with you again and having both Dr. Makoni and Eddie speak to us about different issues that affect men and this initiative that we are embarking on. Thank you and have a great day.
Just a quick
Thank
one,
you.
a quick one before we go. Something just came now, like literally 10 seconds ago.
Yeah,
There's a question. I think someone managed to slip one in. The question is it's actually from YouTube. And the question is, what resources are available which promote healthy forms of masculinity? And of course, the person also gives a suggestion and says, my suggestion is the book The Will to Change, published in 2004 by Bell Hooks. So I don't know, Doc, if you want to address that one quickly. What resources are available which promote healthy forms of masculinity?
I have a weakness of remembering authors, but there is it's a study, I think, if I remember well, Authentic Manhood. Then there is a book on Stanley. I'll send to you, and then you can post. Raising Modern Day Knights. This one is very practical exercise which you can do. Men are events oriented, so hey, let's go for camping, let's go for trips, let's go for a drive. I'll take you to my former school. All those are opportunities. Ultimately, really, we need time. We need to invest time. Life is time. Let's invest time with each other.
absolutely. We look forward to having such initiative you have spoken about and to encourage men to attend these where we have retreats and engage each other and spend time with each other for the betterment of ourselves.
There's another book recommendation here. Actually, from the Raising Modern Day Knights. So there's a website actually, www.raisingmoderndaynights.org. So if you just go on there, I believe that's probably the website for the book itself. So I'll just show it quickly. That's what it looks
Awesome.
like. Yeah. I think that was there are no more questions. I think that was the only one.
Thank you for interacting with us and giving us information we can share with other men. And once again, I encourage you, join and stay in touch with the Lion Hearts of Africa for future events. Good evening and God bless you all.
Thank you all. Good night. Bye.
Good night.